When most people picture a man in his early 50s, they do not picture financial danger. They picture the years when the income is finally strong, when the house is paid down enough to feel stable, when the children are old enough to need less constant attention, when a career has enough weight behind it to create respect, title, and momentum. They picture the decade when hard work is supposed to start turning into freedom. That is exactly why this period is so dangerous. The average 53-year-old American man does not look like a financial disaster. He often looks successful. He owns a home. He drives a decent car. He takes a vacation now and then. His children go to good schools. He may be earning more money than he has ever earned in his life. To the outside world, and often to himself, he appears to be doing just fine. But there is a difference between looking fine and being safe. A man can be walking around in a pressed shirt, carrying a serious title, talking about investment accounts and college plans, while the hole under his feet gets deeper every single month. He may not be broke. In many cases, that is the trap. He is not broke enough to feel panic. He is not poor enough to be forced into honesty. He is comfortable enough to delay the arithmetic. I have spent my life thinking about capital, and I can tell you something that does not get said often enough. A great many people do not lose because they never made money. They lose because they built a life that required too much money to stand still. That is a very different problem. I want you to picture something I find useful, but a real one, heavy, massive, made to hold a ship in place. Now imagine that anchor is made of gold. It shines. It looks expensive. It signals accomplishment. People can see it from far away and know it costs something to obtain. They admire it. They may even envy it. That is what much of middle-aged consumption looks like. The mortgage on the bigger house is a golden anchor. The luxury car lease is a golden anchor. The club membership is a golden anchor. The second home that gets called an investment is a golden anchor. The private tuition contract, the subscriptions nobody audits, the lawn service, the cleaning service, the dues, the status travel, the expensive habits that quietly become permanent. Every one of them is a golden anchor. Anchors are wonderful when the sea is calm and you want to feel stable. But when the tide changes, when the market falls the year you plan to retire, when your employer restructures, when a parent needs care, when a child needs launching money, when a marriage breaks, when your own body delivers a bill you did not expect, that same anchor does not protect you. It holds you in place while the water rises. Then it pulls you under faster than almost anything else could. The men who arrive at old age with real freedom are not always the ones who displayed the most success in midlife. Very often they are the ones who quietly cut loose what everyone else was still polishing. That is the central idea here. The most dangerous financial trap for a man in his 50s is not lack of income. It is mistaking the appearance of wealth for the structure of wealth. Those two things can travel together for a while. Eventually they separate. When they do, the truth is merciless. A man named Richard makes the point better than any theory. Richard is 51. He is a regional sales director at a mid-sized company. He earns $190,000 a year. That is more than his father ever earned. It is more than he once imagined he would earn himself. On paper, he looks like a man who has made it, but the world costs Richard too much before Richard has even begun to live his day. His mortgage, taxes, and insurance run about $4,200 a month. He has a car lease on a BMW because after 20 years of work, he decided he had earned the right to enjoy what he drove. He has a boat he barely uses, but it still demands monthly financing and storage. He belongs to a country club he justifies as networking. He has 2 children in private high school, each one costing real money every single year, before groceries, before gas, before restaurants, before a birthday gift, before anything that feels optional. Richard has committed himself to something like $12,500 a month. After taxes, his take-home is closer to $10,600. He is underwater before the month begins. That is not a character flaw. That is arithmetic. Richard is not stupid. He is not wild. He did not wake up one morning and decide to destroy his future. He said yes to individually reasonable things for 25 straight years. Each decision cleared the same easy hurdle. Can I afford them? That question ruins people. Most people use affordability to mean that the checking account can survive the payment. That tells you almost nothing about wealth. A $3,000 monthly payment and a $3,000 monthly investment contribution both leave the bank account. On a statement, they can look identical. In your future, they do the exact opposite thing. One builds optionality. The other, when I look at a case like Richard, I do not say he needs a raise. I say his burn rate outran his savings rate for 15 years, and now the gap between income and wealth has become impossible to hide. Income can rise for a long time while wealth barely moves. That is because income is motion. Wealth is retained motion. Wealth is what remains after spending, after fees, after taxes, after errors, after pride, after the small decisions that felt harmless because they were spread over years. The 50s are when that difference stops being theoretical. There is a psychological shift that happens somewhere in the late 40s. A man spends his 30s and early 40s trying to build. He is hungry. He is outward moving. He wants more territory, more income, more proof. Then, very quietly, he becomes protective. He starts thinking less about what he can build and more about what he must preserve. That sounds mature. It can even feel wise. But many men end up protecting the wrong thing. They do not protect productive capital. They protect lifestyle, they protect identity, they protect the visible structure that tells the world they succeeded. Appearance charges rent. That is one of the most expensive truths in personal finance. I have seen men work very hard to maintain symbols that no longer serve them. The school district, the larger house, the watch, the membership. The annual trip that has stopped being joyful but still has to happen because it belongs to the identity of the family. None of these expenses seems fatal in isolation. The danger comes from the stack. A fixed obligation stack is a chain. One link rarely sinks a man. 15 links might. Now let us go one layer deeper, because there is another trap that men in their 50s almost never model correctly. Most of them think the main problem is how much they have saved. A serious problem is what happens to what they saved if the sequence goes wrong. I am talking about sequence of returns risk, which is an academic sounding phrase for a very practical disaster. If a man reaches retirement with a portfolio and then suffers heavy losses early while making withdrawals, the averages on paper can lie to him. Imagine a man retiring with a portfolio that looked adequate under a smooth projection. Then the market falls 30 or 35% right at the beginning. The long-term average over the next 20 years may still look respectable. That does not save him if he is forced to sell shares while the portfolio is damaged. He is not just living through volatility. He is converting temporary price declines into permanent capital destruction because he must withdraw while the market is weak. That is what people miss. A portfolio is not only a pile of assets, it is a timing machine. The order in which gains and losses arrive matters enormously once withdrawals begin. A man who needed his capital intact at 63 can be broken by a bad first 2 years, even if the next 18 are decent. The averages may comfort a spreadsheet. They do not comfort a retiree selling assets at a discount to buy groceries. That is why many people who suffered around the financial crisis did not recover the way charts suggested they should. The market can recover while the person does not. The person is drawing down through the hole. If you are in your 50s and have never stress tested that reality, you are not planning, you are hoping. Hope is not a strategy. Hope is what people lean on when the math would disturb them too much. Let me show you another man. Gary is 54. By ordinary standards, he is successful. He has $600,000 under management at a respected wealth firm. He receives quarterly reports. He trusts the process. He knows he is not as far ahead as he would like, but he also believes he is in professional hands. Now we arrive at one of the most underappreciated leaks in finance. Fees that are small enough to hide emotionally can still be large enough to change a life. Gary is paying around 1.2% annually on $600,000. In a single year, the number does not feel seismic. It gets described in basis points and industry language. It sounds civilized, it sounds normal, but compounding does not care how politely a fee is described. The difference between a high advisory fee and a broad low-cost index approach, extended over years, is not a footnote. It is another retirement income stream walking out the door. A quarter here, a quarter there, a tiny subtraction each statement. Nothing dramatic enough to force an emotional reaction. That is exactly why it works. People react to a bad stock tip because it feels sharp and memorable. They often fail to react to fees because the injury is smooth. A smooth injury can be more dangerous than a sharp one. You adapt to it while it keeps taking your future away. Gary has another problem. His advisor never prioritized strategies that might reduce his future tax burden in a serious way. That omission does not prove bad intent. It does show you something important. Advice does not exist in a vacuum. Incentives matter. The person across from you may be optimizing pieces of your life without ever confronting the full picture, especially if confronting the full picture would reduce assets under management or force uncomfortable restructuring. That is not conspiracy thinking. That is systems thinking. Who benefits from a structure tells you a lot about how strongly that structure will be defended. Now, Gary's story becomes more serious because the true financial danger of the 50s is not usually a single problem. It is concurrency. One problem can often be managed. 3 or 4 problems arriving in the same window can change the rest of a life. The first is aging parents. People speak casually about helping mom or dad as though this is usually a minor temporary gesture. It can become something very different. Parents are living longer. Many saved less than they needed. Medical support is one matter. Long-term care is another. A parent can move from mostly independent to expensive need faster than a family expected. A son who thought he was entering his highest saving years can suddenly become a support system for another household. Gary's mother needed memory care. The cost was real. Her savings were not enough to support it for very long. He now sends thousands every month into a need he never budgeted for. That is not selfishness punished. That is life arriving. The second pressure is adult children. Most men account for the cost of raising children when the children are young. They often underestimate the cost of launching them when the children are older. College, housing, support, the years between adolescence and full independence. These are not abstract ideas. They are large claims on capital. During exactly the same years, a man should be reinforcing his own future. It is easy to say children are worth any sacrifice. That is emotionally true and financially incomplete. If the sacrifice is funded from current cash flow, home equity, or retirement savings, the cost compounds in ways most families do not measure while making the decision. They evaluate the immediate need. They do not always evaluate the shadow cost to the parent's old age. The third pressure is the one nobody enjoys naming clearly. Late divorce is a financial earthquake. A divorce at 34 is painful, but there is still runway. There is time, there is unfinished accumulation. There is elasticity in the future. A divorce after 50 is different. It does not merely divide a life in motion. It often divides the very stockpile built for the final stretch. Accounts are split. Houses must be sold or refinanced. Legal expenses arrive at the same moment emotional clarity departs. Support obligations can linger. The event lands precisely when the clock is already loud. Gary is separated. His mother's care is ongoing. One child is approaching college. His fee structure is quietly working against him. His plan is exposed to sequence risk. None of these facts alone guarantees disaster. Together they create something far more dangerous than a simple budgeting issue. This is why so many competent, responsible men hit the middle 50s and feel a kind of private suffocation they struggle to explain. They are not always failing in a dramatic way. They are carrying too many simultaneous claims on future cash flow. The numbers are not wild. The overlap is wild. Now we arrive at the trap that cuts even deeper because it hides behind praise. Professional identity becomes expensive to maintain. By 50, many men are not merely people. They are titles, they are reputations, they are known as the managing director, the founder, the expert, the rainmaker, the man who built a team, the man who can be counted on. That social weight feels earned because it is earned. The problem is that social weight tends to invite a supporting lifestyle, a certain neighborhood, a certain car, a certain school, a certain travel pattern, a certain set of memberships, a certain look. No one sends an annual statement showing the compound cost of status maintenance. That is why this trap survives for so long. If there were a clean line item showing what a prestige footprint costs over 20 years, a lot of men would be sick to their stomachs. Two men can earn the same income and arrive at completely different futures because one buys approval while the other buys options. I have seen that distinction again and again. One man chooses the correct suburb, the correct car, the international trip every year, the club, the visible signals that reassure everyone around him that he belongs to a successful class. The other man does not live like a hermit. He simply acts with intention. He buys the used car outright. He chooses the good district instead of the best one. He travels well, but less often. He fills retirement accounts early and steadily. He adds to low-cost productive assets month after month. The first man may have better photographs. The second man has a better balance sheet. Photographs do not fund freedom. Options fund freedom. Many people think the biggest difference between rich and not rich is earnings. Often the more durable difference is burn rate. Burn rate tells you how much the world costs you just to remain yourself. That is a profound number. Most people never calculate it honestly. They know what they earn. They know the rough shape of what they own. They know whether they feel stretched, but they do not sit down and total every fixed commitment that must be funded before life even starts. Mortgage or rent, car payments, insurance, tuition, dues, subscriptions, debt service, support to family members, recurring costs attached to identity. That total is the floor. If the floor is too high, the house is unstable no matter how handsome it looks. A man earning $180,000 a year with an $11,000 monthly burn rate is living a fundamentally different reality from a man earning the same amount with a $6,000 monthly burn rate. The first may look successful and still be heading toward fragility. The second may look less impressive and still be walking toward freedom. Give them the same market, give them the same 15 years. Give them the same broad investment returns. One arrives with choices, the other arrives with explanations. That is not because the market was unfair, it is because one interrupted compounding less. You do not lose future freedom all at once. You lose it one obligation at a time. One more expensive car, one more fixed payment, one more subscription, one more visible signal, one more habit that says to the world, I have arrived. Then suddenly you discover that your retirement income even combined with Social Security and portfolio withdrawals, covers only a fraction of the life you built. At that stage, men do painful things. They work longer than they wanted. They sell under pressure. They downsize from weakness instead of strength. They panic when they should be patient and stay stubborn when they should be flexible. And then they tell themselves the market did this to them. Sometimes the market did some of it. A great deal of the damage was already built into the structure before the market had its turn. This is why I have always respected simplicity more than display. Simple structures survive stress better. Low fees survive stress better. Lower burn rates survive stress better. Broad productive assets survive stress better. A modest life funded by strong compounding is not flashy, but it contains something very precious. It contains room to absorb bad luck, room to wait, room to change your mind, room to help a parent without destroying yourself, room to take care of a child without liquidating your future, room to survive a downturn without becoming a forced seller. People underestimate how valuable room is. Room is what turns a setback into an inconvenience instead of a tragedy. Gary eventually learns this the hard way. He settles the divorce. He loses the house and a large portion of his investable assets. He does not get the glamorous retirement timeline he once imagined, but he does something that many men refuse to do until it is too late. He cuts the anchor. He moves to a smaller place. He lowers his fixed obligations. He simplifies the investment structure. He begins making more tax-aware decisions. He accepts that he may not retire as early as he hoped, but he stops the drowning. That is a very important distinction. There is a difference between failing to achieve the ideal picture and preventing a financial collapse. A lot of men delay the necessary cut because the cut feels like an admission. They fear the smaller apartment means defeat. They fear the cheaper car means decline. They fear leaving the club means loss of status. They fear reducing the visible structure means confessing that the old structure was unsound. Ego loves delay. Arithmetic punishes it. When a man says, "I cannot give that up now," he should ask a harder question, if not now, when? After the market decline, after the health scare, after the layoff, after the divorce filing, after the parent enters care, after the college invoice, after the credit line is already doing the emotional work that savings should have done. Timing matters in all capital allocation. It matters in restructuring a life too. The best time to cut an anchor is before the tide turns against you. Most people wait until the water is at their chin. Let me tell you something else I have learned. Boring wins more often than exciting in finance. The culture admires excitement. People like stories about the bold sector call, the brilliant trade, the dazzling thesis, the heroic purchase that made somebody look clever at dinner. But most durable fortune has been built in a much more humble way. Automatic contributions, low cost, patience, productive assets, limited interruption, a life designed so that compounding can work without being constantly robbed to fund identity. That does not impress many people in real time. It impresses the future. The future is the only audience that matters. If I were speaking to a 53-year-old man who looked fine, who was not in obvious crisis, who still believed he had plenty of time because the salary was high and the career was stable, I would tell him this: the danger is not that you have no money. The danger is that you have just enough money to avoid honesty. You can carry too much house, too much car, too much tuition, too much image, too many fees, too much invisible leakage, and still remain socially believable for years. The outside world does not see the balance between your lifestyle and your future. It sees signals. It sees confidence. It sees the shell. The shell can be very expensive. I would ask him to calculate one number without excuses. What does the world cost you each month before food, before fun, before choice, before life? That is the number that tells the truth about whether your structure serves you or owns you. I would ask him to examine every fee that leaves his capital quietly. Not just the dramatic mistakes, the smooth leaks, the advisory fee that sounds small, the fund cost hidden behind jargon, the insurance product with complexity attached to it, the subscriptions and memberships that continue, because canceling them would force an identity conversation. I would ask him to stress test his retirement plan against a bad sequence, not a pleasant average. What happens if the market drops hard in the first years you need the money? What happens if you must help a parent at the same time? What happens if a child needs more runway than you hoped? What happens if the marriage that looked stable no longer is? Not because these things are certain, but because men in their 50s do not get paid for pretending concurrent risk does not exist. Then I would tell him something that may sting. If your structure only works when everything goes right, your structure does not work. A good financial life must survive disappointment. It must survive timing that offends you. It must survive a bad year. It must survive a bad sequence. It must survive the fact that human life rarely delivers obligations one at a time. There is another reason this topic matters. Once a man moves past 50, time changes character in youth. Mistakes can be large and still recoverable because time is abundant. In middle age, time is still enough to matter, but no longer enough to waste. The years between now and retirement are not a vague open field. They are the final compounding runway. Every unnecessary dollar leaking out during this period is more expensive than it was at 30, because now the clock is louder and the capital base matters more. This is why a modest reduction in burn rate in your 50s can be worth more than people imagine. Cut $800 a month from an obligation you do not truly need, and the result is not merely a lower bill. It is future capital. It is a buffer. It is freedom bought back. It is a smaller chance that you become dependent on a strong market at the exact wrong moment. The same is true with fees. A point here and a point there can sound harmless to a person who thinks in annual terms. Compounding thinks in decades. Fees do not simply reduce current income. They impair future optionality. The same is true with taxes, with debt, with lifestyle inflation, with every decision that converts potential productive capital into permanent maintenance. I am not arguing for misery. I am arguing for proportion. Enjoying money is not a sin. Needing too much money to preserve an image is a trap. Helping family is honorable. Destroying your own solvency while failing to name the cost is not wisdom. Owning a home can be sensible. Building your entire identity around a house payment that limits every other move is not safety. Working with an advisor can be useful. Delegating your entire financial understanding to a structure whose incentives you never examined is not prudence. The deeper truth is that many men in their 50s are not battling markets. They are battling accumulation of commitments, and commitments behave differently than expenses. An expense is a thing you pay. A commitment is a thing that shapes your future behavior. Commitments tell you what job you cannot leave. They tell you what risk you cannot take. They tell you what city you cannot move from. They tell you how long you must work. They tell you whether a market downturn is a mere annoyance or a genuine threat. That is why I care so much about the shape of a life, not just the size of an income. A life with lower obligations can survive bad luck with dignity. A life built on prestige and continuous maintenance can break under conditions that do not look dramatic from the outside. I have always liked businesses with pricing power and balance sheets that could survive storms. A household should be built the same way. It should have room. It should have resilience. It should not require perfect weather to remain afloat. If you want a single line to remember, it is this: what most men call stability in their 50s is often just a stack of golden anchors in calm water. That calm water does not last forever. Sooner or later, the market reminds people that prices can fall. Families remind people that obligations can multiply. Health reminds people that the body issues invoices. Age reminds people that runway is not unlimited. Pride reminds people that symbols are harder to release than they should be. At that moment, the man who looked quieter a decade earlier often turns out to be stronger. He was the one who bought the used car and owned it. He was the one who let some social opportunities pass. He was the one who invested automatically. He was the one who chose lower fees over more impressive language. He was the one who asked whether this payment built freedom or consumed it. He was the one who accepted that there is nothing glamorous about compounding until it has already worked. The man who looked louder may still survive, but he must now restructure under pressure. He must finally do the math he avoided when life still felt easy enough to postpone it. It is always better to act from strength. That is why the correct response is not despair. It is honesty followed by action. Sit down and calculate the floor. Find the obligations that do not produce enough value to justify their grip on your future. Reduce the invisible leakages. Stress test the plan. Favor simple, low-cost, productive assets. Acknowledge that the next 10 years matter enormously. Protect the future more than the image. Cut what needs cutting before circumstances cut it for you. I can promise you this. Very few men regret having more flexibility. Very few regret lower fees once they understand them. Very few regret having a lower burn rate when the world becomes uncertain. Very few regret owning more productive capital and fewer symbols that must be fed every month. The regret usually runs in the other direction. It sounds like this. I thought I had more time. I thought the income would keep rising. I thought the market would carry me. I thought the house meant I was solid. I thought the advisor had modeled the whole picture. I thought I could always fix it later. I thought because I looked fine, I was fine. That sentence has cost a lot of people their freedom. If you are a man in your 50s or you love one, understand the real issue. This is not about whether you have been reckless. Many have not. It is about whether success has slowly hardened into a structure too expensive to sustain. The decade that should have converted effort into freedom can also convert comfort into fragility. That is why this period deserves more honesty than most people give it. The clock is not gone, the window is not closed, but the years between now and 62 or 65 are more valuable than they feel. Capital still has time to compound. Structures still have time to be simplified. Damage still has time to be reduced. A life that looks trapped can still become lighter. But only if the anchors are named, only if the man stops asking whether he can afford the payment and starts asking whether the payment is buying freedom, only if he stops polishing the gold and starts measuring the weight. That is the whole game, not looking wealthy, becoming hard to sink,